And our next speaker is the Director of the National Road Safety Partnership Program at Monash University's Accident Research Centre, who'll be speaking about construction, logistics and community safety, a new paradigm in sharing road safety. We all win! ! Jerome Carslake has extensive knowledge of workplace road safety management, program delivery and collaborative developments of solutions. We will have an opportunity to ask questions after the presentation, so please send yours through, and a big welcome to Jerome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today, and thank you very much for Wholesome. And there's so many fantastic presenters following on me, which will expand on detail. So the approach I'm going to taking is really exploring, I guess, in the presentation, this risk that's sitting in there at the moment, but there's an opportunity which we can sort of embrace to really create lasting change. I mean, if we all get behind it, and the key thing is it's around collaboration. So I'm going to be talking at a higher sort of level, and then sort of moving through and sort of touching on these sort of key points at the moment. But first, I just want you all to think about, this is pre-COVID sort of data done by Deloitte. If you look at the pipeline of major projects coming through Australia at the moment, it's unprecedented. We're on a big build span, which we just have never seen before. And now that we're going through COVID, there's more been added to this opportunity. And we're now estimating it's around a $200 billion build on top of what's listed here is around 85 to 90 billion. And what that means is a lot of these projects are taking place in the hearts of our cities. It's around focusing on moving people around and generating the economy and growing things as it's taking place and being delivered. But what it means also is trucks are the key component which enable these projects to occur. And they're going to be happening in the hearts of our cities, which means there's a risk of greater interactions between heavy vehicles and vulnerable road users. And so the key thing is when these things happen, across the media, it's truck kills. It's a focus on how can we then change this and use this instead of saying, look, we've got these projects coming in. How can we use this as a chance, as a catalyst to create lasting change moving forward? Because we don't want these projects to be introduced at the expense of community safety or even organisational risk as well. And what I mean by that is if you sit there and you look at the heavy vehicles, and I deliver the Amy Gillett Foundation Sharing the Roads Safely Module 2, and Marilyn will be talking about that later on. If you look at the heavy vehicles, are only 4% of our fleet. But when you sit there and you look at the number of fatalities they're involved in, and this is just Victorian data, they account for 50% of fatals involving pedestrians and cyclists in our sort of CBD. And the simple thing is a lot of people that it's siloed. Truck drivers, pedestrians, motorcyclists, cyclists, everyone sort of works in their own little silos and they don't understand how to safely interact with each other. And if we look to New South Wales at the moment, and I just want to point out these blue maps don't represent water at the moment. The darker ones, what they say is they highlight where there's greater amounts of fatalities taking place. And the key thing is, which won't surprise anyone, the more urbanised the areas, and you can see the Sydney CBD here has the highest concentrations of fatal and serious injuries involving trucks and vulnerable road users. So the key thing is that these are all stats and numbers, and as Jim pointed out earlier, these have a very personal touch as well. Now, if we look back, and this just continuously pops up in the media, but I'd like to go back in time a little bit back to 2015 in particular. If we look at it, Vitalia that took place, there was a young lass from Copenhagen was over. She was studying up in Queensland, the University of Queensland, and she's from Copenhagen. So she's grown up riding a bike. And sadly, there was just an interaction with a truck when she was turning and the truck was turning. The truck driver did not see her. He was driving a 4-year-old second-hand Kenworth tipper, and the two of them sadly interacted. Unfortunately, even a truck moving at 10, 15 k's an hour can be fatal. Now, going through a coronial inquest, what came out of this was three to four sort of key recommendations. On that, they're sort of pointing out that bike boxes as a whole, the truck should be set back from that, and the bike boxes should, so you can have clear visibility for the truck with regards to seeing those around them and within the blind spots. But the other part was also highlighting that trucks should also have all the latest technology and be using mechanisms to reduce the blind spots that take place. So that was a recommendation back in 2015. But the other part is, and this is where it's not just focusing on the truck or the infrastructure, it was also getting other road users to understand how to safely interact with trucks. And that is a continuous problem. Very few people have ever driven a truck, sat in a truck, and they do not understand the realities of what a truck means. I myself have a heavy vehicle motor combination license. And over time, you begin looking at the trends and they just keep popping up. And unfortunately, there's a cost that comes with each of these lives. There's a ripple effect. It's not just the driver, it's the families, and these have a lasting impact over time. Now, the way to really address this, as pointed out by the coroner, is it's not around one single group saying, let's try and fix this problem. It's around a shared responsibility. So everyone's got to do their part to improve the safety and reduce the risk for all road users on there and try and break down these silos and get us working together. So if we reflect on it, government itself provides a lot of funding for this infrastructure. They have the ability to go through and influence the contracts and put terms and conditions that could create a standardised approach for the safety interactions of any of these vehicles, and drivers and training and community engagement with regards to any of these projects that take place. The construction projects themselves are about implementation of it. How can they, and they can benefit from it as well. Industry, giving them a clear line of sight and getting them to understand what their components are, how they can implement it, and giving them a pipeline of confidence over time as well. So if these contracts and standards come in, it's flowing through and they know if they put these in place. And the final part is the community. They have a huge role to play. And it's around getting them to really understand their responsibility as well and safely interacting with these vehicles, because all of us need to work together and do our part to share the responsibility for road safety. And a little bit later on, Bernard Carlin will be touching on the safe system, which will really explore this in greater detail. Now, what I want to highlight here, and this is some great sort of work by Hansen, and what I want to touch here is if you look at these different truck designs, this is a bit of work you can get from our website. It highlights all the blind spots of each of these sort of trucks. And you think about a truck driver, if he's moving between vehicles, is he aware of how these sort of change? But my focus isn't on Hansen here. What I want to talk about is this truck and dog sitting right here and illustrate an example. Now, these drivers, they have some fantastic urban driver training, and they shared this narrative with me. Is this truck and dog was parked at the front, or was pulling up, I should say, to lights at the front of Southern Cross Station. A lady and her husband with a pram decided, rather than crossing at the stoplight, they saw a chance, they weaved around the traffic, and what they found was themselves crossing right in between the truck and the dog there. They didn't realise there was actually two vehicles, and they didn't realise there was a drawbar. The truck driver was scanning the mirrors and saw this happen. He took the moment, he stopped the truck, and he had to wait. And so the lights actually turned green, and he was seeing that, and he could see the shoulders popping out as they were getting over the drawbar. Meanwhile, the traffic is abusing the truck driver for blocking traffic. So he did his part because he's aware of the risk, and this could have turned fatal in a major way. But the other part is making mistakes, government design. This is a place that's on St Kilda Road. Here's a textbook example where it creates ill will and issues between drivers and vulnerable road users at the same time. Now, if you imagine here, a truck pulls up and there's a green box there, which all the cyclists will pull up when they're moving through into this sort of direction. A green arrow comes on, but the lights are red. What happens? The cyclist remains sitting in there, the truck's sitting there waiting, has a green arrow, but the truck can't move. So what begins happening is there's aggression begins building up. So this is a fail from infrastructure point of view. If we moved it across into this site, create a bit of a no man's land, removes the blind spot, the truck can then safely turn as well. So these are examples which goes beyond and showing how we can all share the responsibility for making people safe on the road. Now, from an NRSVP's point of view, when we saw this big bill was taking place, we began saying, well, how can we look at best practice? Rather than trying to recreate the wheel, what can we do differently? And that's when we discovered Transport for London's Construction Logistics and Community Safety Program. So we actually created over time, we did a couple of webinars exploring it, and you can really dive into understand what the scheme is all about, how the standard works, what it's been doing and how it sort of underpins. We signed an MOU with Transport for London and Melbourne Metro project, and what that meant was every month I was having a late night teleconference, linking the two together and sharing learnings and how they can do it. We then secured some funding for a phase one, which is Australian Road Research Board, which used to home the NRSP, kind of did a fantastic job in doing that. And then just last month, we did a webinar bringing together Sydney Metro, Amy Gillett Foundation, Hansen and Transport for London, and really drawing all these threads together. And now we've just finalised the creation of an MOU to really bring everyone together and put another proposal into the NHVR to take this further. Now, why CLOCS? Why did they go about and develop in the UK? They were sitting at the stand where we are now, basically. They're having a significant number of fatalities involving trucks, and they had a massive project, the largest in Europe, a €55 billion project called Crossrail. And when they're building this through the UK, they said, we don't want to go ahead and see a big uptick in deaths of pedestrians and vulnerable road users who are out and about whilst we're doing this project. So we're going to change this. And they actually did some research which underpinned it. They also had a space of fatalities which acted as a real catalyst. But one of the key things I want to really highlight is they actually had leadership from at the top who really drove this and took it forward, and they engaged in industry. And what they did was they created what's the CLOCS Standard. And it brought together all these different organisations, which I'll just show you in a tick. And it pulled together 11 different standards that were popping up all through the UK, touching on this sort of approach. It gave the industry consistency with regards to meeting one standard, and they can move between any of these projects if they meet the CLOCS Standard. So you imagine what that could mean is if you had the same project, construction organisation working on, say, Melbourne Metro or the big build in Victoria and up in New South Wales with such an approach, the trucks could just move between each of them seamlessly, or even to Queensland and other sort of components. So the goal was the safest construction vehicle journey. So it was looking at the logistics approach as well. So it actually provides a clear benefit to it. The primary goal was zero collisions, fewer emissions, and fewer journeys and fewer complaints. And it broke it down by vehicles, driver, management, operations. So it was very, very hands-on, like Jim was talking about earlier. So it's very pragmatic, and you can see how they were sort of focusing on the influence of the regulators, but then they were focused on was providing lots of information and guidance sitting out to the right here to make life as easy as possible and practicable when they actually went through and interested. So did it make a difference? Well, the evaluation pointing out to the CLOCS Standard is it has had a massive impact over there. Some industry data has indicated that there's a reduction in fatalities and serious crash injury between heavy vehicles and vulnerable road users, a big drop in collisions, fewer complaints. And the other thing is the drivers are less likely to commit licensing offences, because you imagine you're all working together. There's a single standard sitting there at the base. So you can obviously go above and beyond it, which I think a lot of our larger tier organisations and providers will do. But then there's also these other flow-on benefits as well, which come through with regards to putting in place. Now, the key thing that enabled this to happen was the MOU that TfL pulled together. And you can see the diversity of organisations that came there. It broke down the silos. It brought them all together in the room. They started actually having conversations. They delivered and developed materials and tools, standards, guidance, which all of them agreed to. And that, to me, is probably one of the fundamental components. Just like Jim pointed out, you've got to have the people in the group together, and they worked together and collaborated on it instead of trying to do it all in silos. Now, here in Australia, we recognise that there's a great opportunity from a federal level. They've been pointing this out time and again. It's been mentioned in I guess, the last National Road Safety Action Plan. It was reported out in Action K, where they said these sort of systems should be put in place with regards to vulnerable road users, safety, technology, education. There was an inquiry into why is our road trauma going up in the country. And once again, that was by Jeremy Woolley and John Crozier. And they said there's huge opportunities to leverage off government contracts and build safety expectations. And now the National Road Safety Draft Strategy that's out at the moment, and it's just closed for consultation last night at midnight, that once again included a bit of a soft action pointing out that once again they can do that again in the coming sort of decade. If we look at Australia, what's taking place, once again, we're our best in doing things in silos. We have some fantastic leadership coming out of Victoria and New South Wales. If we look at what's taking place here, so I've just posted it all up on the Vic Roads website. You can see all the fantastic materials taking place. They've completed and designed a high-impact route assessment tool to actually provide guidance and logistics. There's now fantastic driver training, so drivers can actually experience the viewpoint from a vulnerable road user. And there's nothing like getting on a bike seat, going down the road and actually experiencing a truck going past, understanding why it's a concern to people. But on the likewise, it's also crucial in getting people to swap seats, to sit in the truck, to experience how to work around it. And I think that's where there's so much opportunity for the industry to work collaboratively around that. If we move into New South Wales, we're seeing some fantastic leadership taking place in here. There's the Fresno Lens trial, which is taking place. There's all the safety feature technologies, which are summarised in here, which is all being filtered into part of the standards and requirements for the Sydney Metro project. And one of the key things is, I think, is this Be Truck Aware. And when I deliver the vulnerable road user training for Amy Gillett Foundation, we share that. And the truck drivers sit there every time going, why isn't that in place in Victoria? There's also a program which is in Victoria with actually creating a pipeline over the next decade for the technology which trucks should have in place. So they've got to have the not, they should have, and the nice have sort of approach. And then from an NRSP point of view, we delivered a webinar around some work done by Michael Holmes. And then we also have a number of case studies and material. And tomorrow we have actually a detailed case study with Lang O'Rourke, and you'll be hearing about a bit more on the senior level from a higher view, but this is going to be diving into the deep planning of the central station, how Lang O'Rourke's moving some incredible materials, doing the work in there, 22,000 plus truck movements in the life of that project. And the reason I have Safe Load program here is, yes, there are differences in Australia between the UK, but we can adapt and learn. So the Safe Load program is in the DG Centre around terminals. We can take the learnings and how that's been done, I believe, and create our own sort of CLOCS program aligning with the UK. And they're happy to share £5.5 million worth of material and content they've developed in the UK, which we can bring across to Australia and adapt here. Now, next steps, we're looking at having a CLOCS forum workshop just for a couple of hours on 27th of May. Everyone's very welcome to come along. It'll lock down the technical groups. And as you can see here, we have the chairs locked down and we have a diversity of organisations leading and pulling together the key elements of it. But my challenge to everyone here today, we've just locked down what I mentioned to the MOU. So a steering group has been created that's going to direct it and take things forward. And you can see the diversity of the group on that. It's just been finalised. We already have a number of supporting partners have reached out following on our December session, and they wanted to get involved and be first movers in making the point. And we've just sort of finalised this flyer. And what I'm finding out, we're here because of an enforceable undertaking. This is a great opportunity to really raise the standards and getting industry and all the silos, government, regulators, cycling groups, all working together on actually raising it up and getting everyone aware and sort of talking and collaborating around that. Otherwise, are we going to be having the same conversation again in 3 to 4 years? Will there actually be any lasting sort of change taking place? And this is a great opportunity. There's no sort of cost in stepping in, but it's more of a commitment to say, look, we want this in place. Industry's going to do it. It will give confidence to the larger players that the subcontractors and all those sort of ones will be stepping up and meeting the same sort of standard. You can always go above and beyond. So I just want to acknowledge, the key sort of group, the steering group sitting behind the CLOCS A, who we've been meeting sort of fortnightly and pulling this all together and building it, taking it all forward. So it was a very sort of walking through a fantastic sort of journey at the moment. I'm excited where this can sort of go in the future. And I hope there's a great opportunity to work with industry and to work with a lot of the other sort of groups, which today there's big divisions in how we can sort of address it. And I always come back to the only way we're going to fix this is by really sharing the responsibility. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jerome, for that presentation. We have a question that's come through. You may have answered it there, but perhaps clarify. Can any organisation sign on to the MOU? That's correct. Any organisation, and the goal is to have the diversity of organisations doing it, because I think there's no way, there's no easier way to break down barriers than people having conversations. And if you can get a cycling group and a truck group talking together, that's a huge win. Okay. You're also talking about one of our earlier speakers from WorkSafe New South Wales, Lisa Foley, was talking about wanting the ambition of getting to zero. We've seen statistics that show that we've had a serious ramp down in the number of heavy vehicle crashes, but we've sort of hit a floor around about 2015, and a couple of speakers have pointed out, as you have, that with the increasing number of massive infrastructure projects in this country, we've got an increased risk, okay? So when you're looking at the CLOCS framework, do you think it really incorporates not only the heavy vehicle community, but in a genuine way, getting all those other road users who perhaps don't know how to deal with heavy vehicles involved in the conversation in a way that will go beyond the immediate group that's in the room, right? Without a doubt, because I think what you see is by having those sort of peers, you start with the major construction sector and you can sort of flow through potentially into local governments, getting them to understanding, empowering them to understand how they can have conversations in their local sort of groups, waste management in particular. You can also bring in the heavy vehicle, OEMs and the guys who build the trucks and the technology pipelines and featuring and guiding and saying, well, this is our minimum standard. And just like with ANCAP, you look at ANCAP that's taken place in the light vehicle sector, this is an opportunity to actually raise the standard up and close that. I guess we have a very old heavy vehicle fleet on the road, and if you can raise the quality of those vehicles up and you can give confidence for people to invest in this as well, is the other sort of key part. So, so yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Thanks so much for making time for us, Jerome. Jerome Carslake there from Monash University's Accident Research Centre. Thanks again for your time. Pleasure. Thank you very much.